New Kid in Town by Andrew Child. This story is read by Scott Brick.
Reacher expected a truck, but he wound up in a car. He expected to be kept waiting in the hot Texas sun, but he got a ride almost at once. He expected trouble when he saw a skinny guy in a suit stick his nose into someone else's business. And on that score, at least, he wasn't wrong. The rest area parking lot was maybe half full, but human behavior being what it is, the vehicles weren't evenly distributed. There were clumps of cars and trucks all bunched up together in some places, and other sections with 3 or 4 empty spaces in a row. The skinny guy had been about to climb into a silver sedan on the right-hand side of one of these gaps, 30 yards from where Reacher was standing. Another guy was heading for a dull blue pickup on the left-hand side. He would be in his late 20s, Reacher guessed, early 30s at the most. He wasn't especially tall, only around 5'10", but he was broad. His sleeveless T-shirt was stretched tight across his chest. His arms were thick. They were covered with a bright, swirling mass of tattoos. So were his calves, which bulged out below his knee-length shorts. He wore black boots, unlaced and gaping open. His head was shaved, and he was hurrying after a girl. She looked around 10 years old, with blonde hair in braids and a yellow sundress and sandals. She stretched for the door handle, then pulled her arm back and darted toward the rear of the truck. The tattooed guy grabbed her by the hair and pulled her back. "Dad!" The girl's voice was shrill. "Let go!" The skinny guy paused, one foot inside his car. He shifted his weight, set his foot back on the asphalt, turned to face the other man and the child. "Hey," he said, "stop that, you asshole! Let her go!" Reacher clamped the lid back down on his carry-out coffee cup and started to move. If it had been any other kind of dispute, a squabble over dinged paintwork, a contest for the most convenient parking spot, he might have left them to it. But this involved a kid, and as things stood, the way he saw them, there was no prospect of a happy ending. There were 25 yards between Reacher and the 3 people. The tattooed guy kept hold of the girl's hair for another couple of seconds. He was acting on his own timetable. He wanted that to be clear. Then he put his hand flat on her chest, slammed her against the side of the truck, and held her there for a few moments, as if the pressure would fix her in place. 15 yards between them. The skinny guy took a step, stiff and tentative. The tattooed guy took a bigger step, confident and aggressive. They locked eyes. Neither of them spoke. 5 yards. The skinny guy edged back. The tattooed guy moved forward. He raised his fist, cocked his arm. They were seconds away from game over, moments away. Then Reacher stepped between them. In the car, Reacher said to the skinny guy. The guy didn't react for a moment. He was too shocked. The giant, messy figure in front of him seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. 6'5", 250 pounds, chest like a refrigerator, arms like most people's legs. He could have been a villain in a horror movie, or the thing you run from in a nightmare. Then the guy's senses kicked in, and he scrambled backward and did what he'd been told. Reacher turned to the girl. In the truck. She climbed up onto the step, pulled open the door, jumped inside, and disappeared from sight. "Your kid?" Reacher said to the tattooed guy. The guy didn't answer. He glared back, but he did lower his fist, which was smart under the circumstances. "Want to keep her?" The guy strode forward. "You're not taking—" Reacher shoved him back one-handed. "Do you want to keep her?" The guy raised his arm again and took a wild swing. He was aiming for the side of Reacher's head. Reacher leaned back and watched the guy's fist sail harmlessly past. "Behave yourself." Reacher checked the lid on his coffee cup. "Don't make me kick your ass in front of the kid." So, You want to keep her? Damn right. Because if you don't, no problem. We can call Child Protective Services right now. They'll take her off your hands, no questions asked. No one's taking my kid. Not you. Not the government. Maybe. Maybe not. Depends if you hurt her again. The guy didn't respond. Reacher said, well, I didn't hurt her. You don't understand. Kids, they act out. You have to show me your wallet. What? Your wallet. You want money. You're SOL. The guy took a billfold from his back pocket and held it up. It was made of imitation snakeskin, frayed and stained and sorry-looking. Reacher took it and flipped it open, then turned it around to show he'd seen the guy's driver's license. Here's something you didn't know. I used to be a military cop. One of the guys from my unit is a Texas Ranger now. I'm going to give him a call. Have him put a flag on your address. Any domestic disturbances, any visits to the emergency room, he'll hear about them. Your kid stubs her toe too often and what? He'll arrest me? Bullshit! No. Reacher shook his head. He'll call me. Then you'll wish he'd arrested you. Mason Greenwood sat in his house in front of his computer 150 miles away, safely out of the heat and the dust. He was working. Although he was almost embarrassed to call it that when he thought of the way business used to be done. He was earning a living then, providing a service, meeting a demand. There was no arguing with that, and no one could call him lazy. He put in more hours than he had to, way more. But then he'd always been a hands-on kind of guy. He could buy his stock from elsewhere, but he preferred to produce it himself. He enjoyed it, and he could automate the transactions as well as the security. There are bots that can handle pretty much everything these days. Maybe he'd use them at some future point. Not yet, though. Not while he was still expanding, looking for new markets. Like the client he was getting ready to pitch. From Japan. They were sticklers for etiquette, those guys. He'd read all about them, done his research. They needed to be handled carefully, and he didn't want to risk a lucrative revenue stream for the sake of a few more hours at the keyboard. Greenwood figured he'd get the deal squared away, then head into town, such as it was, and celebrate. He liked the place. In many ways, the 2 years he'd been there had been the best of his life. Certainly the safest. But it wasn't exactly a heaving metropolis. There wasn't much in the way of fresh blood. Usually, when someone new arrived, it was an event to be savored, especially if she was young, pretty, and happy to stick around for a while. As had happened 2 weeks ago. Greenwood had enjoyed the chase, but now he figured it was time to close another kind of deal. The old V8 spluttered into life. The truck shivered as the tattooed guy dropped it into drive. Its rear tires squealed as he hit the gas. Reacher watched until it disappeared onto the highway, then started toward the section where the trucks were parked. Hey, the skinny guy rolled down his window. I want to thank you. No need. Reacher kept on walking. The guy fired up his engine and reversed out after him. Let me at least drive you to your car. Is it far? I don't have a car. Your truck, then? Don't have a truck. Then where are you going? Reacher shrugged. Wherever the first driver who offers me a ride is going. You're looking to hitch a ride? That's what I said. And you really don't mind where? Somewhere west of here, preferably. Why west? Because I just came from the east. Oh. Okay. Well, I'm heading west. South first, then west. Want to ride with me for a while? Reacher stopped and looked at the guy's car. He figured it was German. Not new, 10 years old at least, based on the style and the degree of fade shown by the 3 expired parking permits stuck on the inside of the windshield. Maybe 15 years. But a good brand, and it seemed in good shape, clean, well-maintained, which meant there was a good chance it would be reliable. A critical factor in that part of Texas. There could be hundreds of miles between one town and the next. Not the kind of place you want to break down. Not unless you want to be dinner for the vultures. How much gas have you got? Full tank. Range? The guy pressed a button at the end of one of the stalks that stuck out from the steering column. 358 miles, if you trust the computer. Reacher nodded, walked around the front of the car, and climbed into the passenger seat. The guy shifted into drive, but kept his foot on the brake. Where's your stuff? What stuff? I don't know. Clothes? Luggage? Suitcases or whatever? I'm wearing my clothes. My stuff's in my pocket. I don't need any luggage. The clothes you're wearing, they're all you have? How many clothes can a person wear at one time? What happens when they get dirty? What do you wear when they're in the wash? I don't wash them. I buy new ones. Isn't that a bit wasteful? No. Oh. Okay. Each to their own, I guess. The guy stretched across and held out his hand. Charles. Charles Bell. People call me Chuck. Reacher. Bell shifted his foot to the gas pedal and set off slowly toward the exit. So, Reacher said once they were on the highway, where are we headed? Small town. Near the border. La Tortuga. Why there? Long story. Reacher didn't reply. Something I'm looking for might be there. What kind of thing? Bell turned away and looked out of his side window for a long moment. A place. An opportunity. My background's in power generation. Renewables, most recently. Solar's my specialty. I work for a non-profit now. Small outfit. Just me, actually. I'm looking to put a coalition together. You know all the talk about a border wall? I want to build one, but out of solar panels. Half the power for the United States, half for Mexico. Something to unite us, not divide us. And help the planet at the same time. Reacher said nothing. Bell said, You think I'm crazy. I was thinking about your idea. This town, it's the place you want to build your wall? I don't know. I've been searching for the right place for a while. A long time. This might be it. Or it might not. Bell loosened his tie. We'll soon see. I wish you luck. Thanks. Bell wiped perspiration from his forehead, despite the air being cranked down low. How about you, Reacher? What do you do for a living? Nothing. I'm retired. From what? The Army. Oh. Bell was quiet for a moment. I hear that a lot of ex-military guys go into law enforcement or join private contracting firms. Things like that. Some do. Not me. So if you don't work, what do you do? Reacher shrugged. I keep busy. Mason Greenwood hit the key to end the virtual chat, then double-checked that the secure connection had really been terminated. Some might have called that kind of behavior paranoid. He called it prudent, and he wasn't in jail, or worse, which to his way of thinking was proof he was right to act that way. He stood up, stretched the knots out of his shoulders, and made his way to the kitchen. It was also at the back of the house. All the rooms he used were. The front part of the building was just for show. Anyone driving by would think nothing had changed since he bought the place, if they thought anything about it at all. It still looked ramshackle, almost derelict, or rustic, as the sleazy real estate guy he'd dealt with out of Fort Stockton had called it. Keeping it that way had been his biggest challenge. He needed to avoid drawing attention. Not altogether, of course. The kind of attention he attracted personally was fine. The kind in the town, in the bar. The kind that came from being the first person in a decade to land there with money, and no federal warrants. The kind from the local losers, who were looking for ways to get paid, and from the ladies, who were looking for other things, he thought. It was just his home Greenwood needed to keep discreet. In particular, the part where he worked. His studio, his computers, his pair of satellite dishes to guarantee uninterrupted internet access, and his backup generator to keep everything working when the local supplies struggled to keep up. The answer had been to tent the place, then to hire 2 construction crews, one made up of old lazy guys who hung around out front, sitting in the sun, drinking beer, wheeling the odd barrow around and occasionally sawing random pieces of wood, and another of top-line professionals brought in from over the border and paid extra to keep out of sight. Their job was to build essentially a whole new house, compact, efficient, and tailored to his exact needs, hidden inside the existing structure. Greenwood opened the fridge and pulled out a bottle of champagne, Dom Perignon 2008. He couldn't honestly tell the difference between vintages. He couldn't tell the difference between champagne and sparkling wine from the grocery store, but he did have a degree of brand awareness. He knew which labels were supposed to be the best, and that's what he felt he deserved, particularly at that moment. The call had been a success, a triumph, in fact. His preparation had paid off. His due diligence. The guy he'd uncovered was a human gold mine. He represented a group of other like-minded individuals, people with very particular tastes. The kind of tastes he was uniquely positioned to cater for, and on top of their tastes was their appetite. They sounded insatiable. They were going to set him up for life. He popped the cork, grabbed a glass, and headed back to his office. He needed to trawl through his archives. His filing system didn't quite mesh with the way his new best customer defined his group's requirements, and he didn't want to miss anything, not with the kind of volume they were talking about. He reckoned he should have enough material stored away for 2 months, 10 weeks if he was lucky. He needed to make sure. Then, start work on a new production schedule. Procuring the raw material might be a challenge. The specification was very narrow. He checked his watch. There was plenty of time before he needed to leave for the bar. And if he was a little late, so what? It wasn't like he had any competition. Bell stayed on I-10 for 20 miles, then coasted around a cloverleaf onto a state highway for 70 miles, then switched to a county road. Each one was narrower than the one before. Each one was quieter. Clearly there was no border crossing at the town they were heading for, Reacher thought, official or unofficial. The roads were too small, and the traffic was too light. He turned to ask Bell for more details, but paused. It might have been the angle of the sun, or the tint of the windows, but he thought Bell appeared different. His skin seemed a couple of shades paler than when they'd left the rest area. It looked clammy, and his eyes seemed to be bulging a little. "Chuck," Reacher said, "You okay?" "Of course. Bell took his left hand off the wheel and shook it like he'd just washed it and couldn't find a towel. Why? How much farther are we going? Bell checked the odometer. 50 miles? 60, maybe. What kind of place is it? Bell shook his left arm again. Not entirely sure. Never been before. Just seen it on Google Earth. Is there a doctor's office there? Or an emergency room? Why? Are you sick? No, but I think you are. Bell slumped a little in his seat. I'm fine. Just tired. Want to stop? Take a break? No. Bell wiped his forehead. Got to keep going. Why? What's the rush? Is there some kind of race to build this solar wall? Bell managed a weak smile. No. It's just... when I set my mind on something... I understand. I feel the same way. But a little tactical flexibility can be a good thing. I guess. Bell took a couple of deep breaths. Maybe a rest would be nice. But I don't want to stop. Not for long. So, how about we pull over? I get in the back, stretch out, maybe take a nap. You drive the rest of the way. It was possible, Reacher thought. He did know how to drive, although he didn't like it much. It wasn't a technical issue. Operating a vehicle was straightforward enough. He'd been trained in the army. He'd done it many times since then and never had any collisions. Not accidental ones, anyway. It was more a question of temperament. He was better suited for explosive bursts of action or long spells of inactivity. Not the kind of measured concentration needed to successfully navigate traffic and pedestrians. But just then, there wasn't any traffic. There weren't any pedestrians. And there did seem to be a real risk of Bell collapsing at the wheel. Mason Greenwood was 3/4 of the way through his bottle of bubbly. With each glass, he'd cranked his music up a little louder, which wasn't a problem. No one would be able to hear it. His house was the second farthest building from the center of town. He'd have preferred the farthest, all things being equal. He'd almost bought the farthest. But there were two things wrong with it. First, the layout. It was basically a big wooden shed. It had been built for storage back in the days when the town straddled a trade route which came up from Mexico and then split east and west. So there were no living quarters. Greenwood would have had to build 2 new structures. A fake section to fool any passers-by, and a concealed section for him to live and work in. Which wouldn't have been the end of the world. He would have considered it, if it weren't for the second issue, the real deal breaker. A complete lack of water. With each glass, he'd also come closer to the conclusion that he had far fewer of the kind of files he would need for his new Japanese customer. At the rate he was finding them, maybe only enough for a month. 6 weeks at the outside, which might be a problem. It left him far less time to ramp up production. He would have to jump on the procurement issue right away. He hadn't dealt with that specific subset for some time. He'd have to develop new contacts. He couldn't suddenly get back in touch with his old ones. That would be too suspicious. It was more than 10 years since he'd done that kind of business, he realized. Where had the time gone? He had no idea. But the length of the interval did explain why he was having less luck with the computer search than he'd expected. Some of his inventory from those days would be on paper, which could offer a reprieve. If he could find the right pages, he could scan them, make digital copies. It would be time-consuming, but possible. And he could start at once. Get a few batches done. See what the quality was like. Confirm whether he'd found a lifeline or not. He checked his watch. He was definitely going to be late to the bar. But so what? It wasn't like he had any competition. Belle passed out on the back seat before the car got moving again. Reacher switched on the radio, tuned it to a blues channel to cover Belle's raspy snoring, and settled in for the balance of the journey. There were 54 miles remaining. Reacher covered them in 49 minutes. He had no problem with traffic. He only saw 3 other cars the whole time, all heading in the opposite direction, plus one Coca-Cola delivery truck. The town of La Tortuga was spread out over a low, shallow hill. First, they passed a scattering of small, low houses, mostly painted peach or yellow, with wide verandas and flat terracotta roofs. Then they came to the commercial section, higher up, spread along both sides of a single street. There were a few shops, a tiny post office, a diner, and in the center on the north side, a hotel. The only building with a second floor. Reacher parked by the entrance and turned to rouse Belle. Inside they found a stern-looking woman sitting behind a reception counter. The top was made of richly polished mahogany. There was a bud vase holding a single yellow rose and a copper bowl containing 3 folded copies of a local map. The walls and ceiling were white, the floor was tiled, and above their heads a fan moved lethargically, barely stirring the air. Belle asked for 2 rooms and handed the woman a credit card. She produced a cell phone, connected a small square device, and pulled the card through a slot on its edge. In his pocket, Belle's phone made a quiet ting. The woman returned Belle's card and followed it with a pair of keys on oversized brass fobs, numbered 1 and 2. "Rooms are at the top of the stairs," she said. "Dinner's in the bar, 5 until 8. Bar closes at 10. Breakfast's 6 until 8. Questions?" Reacher and Belle shook their heads and made their way to the foot of the stairs. Belle was breathing heavily by the time he'd hauled his suitcase and backpack to the top, and the sheen of sweat had returned to his forehead. He handed a key to Reacher, checked the number on the one he'd kept, and used it to open the door to his left. "I'm still feeling tired," Belle said. "Think I'll lie down for a while. In fact, I'm going to call it a day. See you in the morning?" Reacher said, "Sure." After checking his room, which he found satisfactory, a bed, a chair, a closet, and, to his surprise, a little bathroom enclosed in an oval-shaped plastic unit wedged in the corner, Reacher headed back downstairs. He stepped outside, thinking some fresh air would be welcome after the time he'd spent in Belle's car. To the west, he could see the jagged outline of the peaks of the Great Bend National Park. They looked close enough to touch, but Reacher figured they must be at least 50 miles away. The town's single street continued to the east, seeming to lead nowhere in particular. To the south was Mexico, separated by a metal fence. It looked like a line of 20-foot knife blades, glinting maliciously in the fading sunlight. If Belle wanted his solar project to literally span the border, he was going to have to look elsewhere. Reacher felt suddenly sorry for the guy. His enthusiasm for being outside waned. Plus, it was still oppressively hot. He decided to scratch his walk, go back inside, and see what kind of food the place had to offer. The bar took up the full depth of the hotel. It had a window facing to the front, another to the back, and it was about a quarter of the building's width, which made it bigger than Reacher was expecting. And there were more people than he was expecting. 14, including the guy who was serving the drinks. There was a group of 4 men, maybe in their 40s, thin and wiry and tanned, who probably worked outside, all drinking beer from tall frosted glasses. There were 4 couples, ranging in age from late 20s to early 70s, Reacher guessed. And a young woman sitting on her own. A very young woman. She had shoulder-length blonde hair, bright blue eyes, no makeup. She was wearing a white sundress with a pink and red flower pattern embroidered into it. She didn't look a day over 16, and she was halfway through a margarita, with another empty glass at her side. Reacher took a seat at a small round table with his back against the wall where he could see both windows and the door. An old habit, one that had served him well. The bartender approached and he ordered 2 cheeseburgers and a coffee. He watched the other guests while he waited for his food, and the whole time he could feel the woman watching him. She kept it up while he ate his burgers, and when he finished and pushed his plate aside, she took a last sip of her drink and came over to his table. "Mind if I join you?" Reacher didn't answer right away. "I know what you're thinking," the woman said. "This is a setup. Where are the cameras? Where are the cops? But you can relax. I might not look it, but I'm 32 years old. It's a family thing. You should see my mother. She's 60 and she still gets carded. So, can I sit?" "I guess," Reacher said. "I haven't seen you here before." The woman turned and gestured for the bartender to bring her another drink. "What's your story?" "What makes you think I have a story?" "Everyone has a story." "They do? Then what's yours?" The woman smiled. "Touché. But mine's boring. I'm running away from a bad situation. This is as far as I've got. Kind of run out of steam, I suppose." "How long have you been here?" The woman shrugged. "A couple of weeks." "How long are you staying?" She shrugged again. "A couple more? Who knows? How about you?" "I just arrived. I'll be gone in the morning." "Really? The bartender dropped off a fresh margarita for the woman and topped up Reacher's coffee. "I'm Heidi, by the way." "Reacher." "Well, Mr. Here Today, Gone Tomorrow, Reacher. What are you running from?" "Nothing." "Then what are you running to?" "Nothing." "Really? Neither? You sure?" "Absolutely." "How so?" "Running's not a thing I like to do." "Interesting." Heidi picked up her drink. She took a long sip and kept her eyes on Reacher's the whole time. "So what kind of things do you like to do?" Reacher smiled. "Lots of things." "Example?" "Some things are easier to show than tell." "That's very true." "Maybe." A guy had just come through the door. He was about 5'8", stocky, with buzz-cut hair and a pinched, pockmarked face, possibly early 40s, wearing a white dress shirt untucked over loose gray jeans. He was gesturing urgently for Heidi to join him. "Excuse me." A frown crossed her face. "1 minute. Let me get rid of this jackass." Heidi crossed to face the guy. There was lots of gesturing, lots of scowling. Eventually, the guy grabbed Heidi's arm. She pulled free and hurried back to the table. She sat down. He followed. He stood about 6 feet away from her and crossed his arms. Reacher waited a moment to give him a chance to find some manners. The guy stayed where he was. Reacher stood up. The guy backed off, all the way to the far wall. But he didn't leave the room. And he didn't stop glaring at Heidi. "Ignore him," Heidi said. She took another long swig of her drink. "Now, where were we?" "He's a little hard to ignore," Reacher said. "Who is he?" "Some idiot. He hangs around with this other guy, an asshole named Greenwood. He's older, kinda sleazy. Hits on me every time he sees me. Gets mad if I talk to anyone else. I thought Greenwood might be here tonight. I was glad when he didn't show up. But this one, he's harmless. He's annoying. He should leave. For his own safety." "No." Heidi sucked down the rest of her drink, then got to her feet. "We should leave. carry on our conversation somewhere else. Somewhere more private. Heidi was gone when Reacher woke the next morning. There was just a tiny depression in the pillow next to his and a slight hint of her perfume lingering on the sheets. Reacher stayed in bed for another 5 minutes, then got up and showered. He got dressed, folded his toothbrush, put it in his pocket, and went to knock on Belle's door. Belle cracked the door, then opened it all the way when he saw it was Reacher. "Feeling better?" Reacher stepped inside. "I think so." Belle straightened his crumpled blue pajamas and ran his fingers through his hair. "Then it's time to say goodbye." Reacher held out his hand. "Good luck with your wall." "You're leaving?" "No, you can't. I need your help." "With what? I'm not a Solar Coalition type of guy." Belle shuffled back and sat on the edge of the bed. "Neither am I, to tell you the truth. I used to be. I did work in the power industry. I did specialize in solar, but then stuff happened. I lost that job. I'm a private investigator now. I'm here looking for someone, a missing girl. I'm not feeling well, and the kind of people—" "You're not a PI, Chuck," Reacher said. "How do you know?" "Your car. It's too upmarket. It's German. It has Connecticut plates, and it has parking permits inside the windshield and half of a dealer's decal on the edge of the trunk lid. A PI would have a domestic car, or a Honda or Toyota. He'd have local plates, even if they were fake. He'd have nothing that would make it easy for someone to identify the car if they saw it twice. And he'd certainly have nothing that suggested where he lives. Or lived." Belle slumped forward and buried his head in his hands. "So you won't help?" "I didn't say that. But if you want my help, you better start with the truth." Belle looked up. Only the PI part wasn't true. "I am here because of a missing girl. I am looking for someone. I swear." "What girl?" "My daughter." "When did you last see her?" Belle blinked twice. 15 years ago. "That's a long time, Chuck." Reacher tried to soften his voice. "Are you sure she's still alive?" "Fair question. But yes, I'm sure. Here's what happened. My wife left me 15 years ago. She ran away, actually, with our daughter. I never stopped looking for her. It's why I lost my job in the end. I only caught up with her 6 months ago, and by then my daughter had gone her own way. My wife, my ex, was alone." "What's your daughter's name?" "Holly." "Holly's age? Description?" Belle grabbed his wallet from the nightstand and pulled out some papers. One must have been a picture of Holly when she was little. Belle shuffled another piece to the front, unfolded it, and held it out for Reacher to see. It showed someone who looked like a late teenager, with blonde, shoulder-length hair and bright blue eyes. Well now, Reacher thought, this could get interesting. The picture looked kind of like Heidi, the woman from last night, although there was something strange about the image. It had an odd quality to it, almost synthetic. "It's a computer simulation," Belle said. "I didn't have any recent pictures of her. Her mom didn't have any up-to-date ones either, so we had to use this special software. You feed in the pictures you do have, tell it how much time has passed, add any details about accidents or tattoos or piercings or whatever that you know about, and it calculates the person's probable appearance now." Reacher looked at Belle, wondered how old he was, whether he could have a daughter who was 32. Probably not, Reacher thought, But if it was true that Heidi's family looked freakily young— 18, Belle said. You asked Holly's age. Reacher suppressed a smile of relief. Okay, good. So how do you know she's around here? She communicates with her mom via a computer chat room. I found out her screen name. Then I paid someone I know to hack into the system and trace the IP address of the computer she was using. Most recently, it was here. And before you ask, yes, that was very expensive. And yes, that was very illegal. But we're talking about finding my daughter. I don't care about what's legal. No judgment. Reacher held up his hand. But I do have one question. Something that could be a problem. Belle looked suddenly worried. Oh, what? Suppose we find her. What do you want me to do? If she doesn't want to come with you, I'm not going to help you kidnap her. Kidnap her? God, no. I'd never do a thing like that. I'm going into this with my eyes open. I know how long it's been, how much water's under the bridge. I'm going to take it slow. Step 1, make sure she's okay. Step 2, make sure she knows I want to be back in her life. And make sure she knows how to contact me, if she wants that too. And I'm going to be patient. I'm not going to force anything. Okay, that sounds good, but not too challenging, physically anyway. Which brings us back to where we started. Why do you need my help? 2 things. First, finding her. And second— Belle paused for a moment. Second, honestly, for moral support. I need a friend by my side. I didn't think I would, but I do. You saw me yesterday. The state I was in. The closer we got, the worse I felt. I thought my heart was going to give out. I'll stand by you. But finding her? You know where she is. You said your guy hacked her address. What? No, not her address. The IP address of her computer. The chat room service she uses has all kinds of encryption built in to disguise the location of the users. The best my guy could do was narrow it down to this town, not to an individual house. So we're close. This town's pretty small. We should start by showing her picture around. Someone's bound to have seen her. Yes, let me change. Actually, I better hop in the shower real quick. I was sweating like a pig last night. All right, I'll go grab some coffee. See you downstairs in 10. Mason Greenwood forced himself to breathe. It's all right, he told himself. Everything's going to be okay. You just have to run, to disappear. You always knew this day would come. It's what you prepared for. The catalyst is different, that's all. No biggie. No need to panic. Just follow the plan. But which plan? He had 2 levels. One, for if he had a little time. If he picked up a software warning, for example, tripped by the FBI's bots trying to break into his system. Or if he got a coded message from one of the agents whose kids' college funds he was boosting. He'd be able to take more stuff. Personal items that he had in everyday use. Or his old paper archives. Things he could load into the RV before tripping the degausser. The device which blasts out a magnetic pulse strong enough to irrevocably wipe all the hard drives in the house, and setting the timer on the incendiaries. One was preferable for sure, but there was also 2. The real emergency level. If his perimeter alarm was triggered, say, or he spotted the feds sneaking through his yard on his motion-sensing infrared CCTV system, Then he'd have to drop everything and run to the RV, which was a thing of beauty, he always thought. He'd designed its special features himself. The lead-shielded backup hard drives, so the bulk of his work would never be lost. The high-volume freshwater tank, automatically flushed and refilled every morning, and the additional solar panels for the AC, so he could stay off-grid for longer, even in Texas in the height of summer. The auxiliary gas tanks, which were always completely topped off, the remote switches for the degausser and the incendiaries, the self-detaching umbilicals for keeping the batteries charged. And then the feature he was most proud of, which wasn't actually part of the RV at all. The thing that made the RV unstoppable. The special panel in the garage wall. It looked normal, felt normal, but it was actually just a thin skin. The RV could burst through with no danger of damage at all, and no need to wait for a door to crawl open. RVs are tall. His was 14 feet, counting the equipment on the roof. A door would take several seconds to get clear. The difference between escape and capture. He knew because a guy had gotten close once before. Some kind of deranged relative when he lived in Maine. That time the door had jammed and he had to bust through a section of frame and drywall, which did his car no favors at all. He had to ditch it 2 streets away. So, level 1 or 2? Not 2, he decided. The situation was serious, but it wasn't desperately urgent. The police were going to find out. There was no way to avoid that. But not until someone alerted them. That could take a while. Then they'd have to make their way out to La Tortuga. There was no police station within 50 miles. That was one of the things that had originally attracted him to the place. He probably had the rest of the day minimum, which pointed to level 1. Greenwood took another minute to work on his breathing. Then he went to his office. His paper archives were still spread out all over the floor from the night before when he'd been searching for the files he wanted for the Japanese. He'd definitely need them. He started to gather them together, then paused. A new thought had entered his brain, a different way of looking at his situation. The plans he'd made were designed to protect him from threats arising from his professional life. But his current problem had nothing to do with his work. It was entirely personal. There was no connection to his business persona, no trail going back for decades, intrinsically bound up with troves of incriminating evidence. It was a one-off, a blip, something completely out of character, something anyone could have done. He wasn't the new kid anymore. The unknown quantity, the person at the forefront of everyone's minds, the one everyone wondered about. But someone else was. Someone who'd been seen in the hotel bar last night. The person who had actually started the chain of events that led to the tragedy. The person who should be held responsible. Who would be held responsible if Greenwood approached things in the right way. Reacher was halfway through his second cup of coffee when a guy approached his table in the bar. "Excuse me, Mr. Reacher." The guy was about 6 feet even, with a big round head, broad shoulders, burly arms, but a narrow waist and incredibly skinny legs. His hair was slicked back and tied up in a ponytail. His shirt was covered in palm trees and parrots, like the kind Reacher had seen people wearing in Hawaii. His pants were some kind of pale-colored chinos, and on his feet he had dusty little beige espadrilles. Reacher took another sip of coffee. "Yes, that's me." "Come quickly, please. It's your friend, Mr. Shell." "Mr. Bell?" "Yes, sorry. Belle, he needs your help. Why? What's he done? He's not well. He's collapsed. He's asking for you. Where is he? Out back, behind the hotel. He wasn't loading the truck on his own, was he? Reacher drained his cup. I told him not to. He promised he wouldn't. He was, sir, yes. He begged me not to tell you. He knew you'd be mad at him, but please, come quick. It's bad. I think he needs to go to the hospital. Reacher stood up. Which way? Down the corridor. Left before the stairs. Reacher's standard operating procedure was to never allow anyone suspicious to get behind him. But that day he made an exception. For 2 reasons. He figured the guy wouldn't make a move until they were outside, where he'd likely have reinforcements. And he wanted to be first to the exit door. He moved fast, to look like he'd bought into the urgency of the situation, and to make sure the top-heavy guy had to hurry to keep up, to build momentum, so that when Reacher opened the door and politely stood aside, the guy was past him and outside before he realized the mistake he'd made. Then all Reacher had to do was let go of the door, let it close, stand to the side away from the hinge, and wait. Reacher pictured the scene. The top-heavy guy would slow down, stop, look around, realize he'd come out alone, glance at his buddies for confirmation, if anyone was backing his play, conclude that Reacher would be running the opposite way, back along the corridor inside the hotel. He'd rush back to correct the error, barge open the door, and race through, at which point his participation in the day's events would be brought to an end. It took 20 seconds for the door to swing open. Reacher was ready. He was watching for it. He knew the exact height of his target, the exact trajectory it would follow, which led to a perfectly executed blow. Reacher's fist connected with the guy's temple with maximum force. It was lights out instantly. And as an added bonus, the other side of the guy's head cracked against the outside face of the door on his way to the ground. Reacher scooped up the inert body and held it in front of him as he stepped outside, just in case anyone had ideas about gunplay. No one did. There was only one other person there. The guy from the bar the previous night. The one who'd harassed Heidi. He was standing next to an ancient pickup. A Chevy, with orange and white paint dulled by years of sun and sand. Heidi told me you were an idiot, Reacher said. Is that true? The guy didn't respond. See what happened to your friend? Reacher dumped the body on the ground. That's what's going to happen to you. It has to. It's a rule. It happens to anyone who tries to attack me. The guy shuffled back a little, but he didn't speak. There's only one way to avoid it, Reacher said. Answer a couple of questions. Are you smart enough to do that? The guy's hand started to creep toward the back of his waistband. Stop, Reacher said. Keep your hand still. Tell me who sent you, and where you were supposed to take me. Tell the truth, and I'll let you walk away. The guy didn't answer. His hand continued to move. Last chance. The guy's hand sped up. Reacher raised his knee and drove the ball of his foot into the guy's abdomen. He flew back and folded at the waist. His face hit the ground. His body slammed down after it. Reacher stepped closer and kicked him again. In the head this time, just to be sure. There was a pistol tucked into the back of the guy's jeans. A Beretta M9. Reacher took it, along with a spare magazine. He checked the guy's pockets. He found a wallet. It held $100 in notes. Reacher took the cash, too. Spoils of war. You lose, you give up your treasure. An ancient tradition. The only other item was a phone. A modern one with a big screen and no buttons. Reacher added it to his haul. He figured he'd investigate it at his leisure when the bodies were secure and he was in a less exposed position. The top-heavy guy's pockets yielded a similar crop. A gun, a spare mag, cash, and 2 phones this time. One modern, one old-fashioned, the kind that flips open with a real keyboard and a much smaller display. A second phone was an anomaly. It made Reacher suspicious. He pressed one of the keys. The screen lit up. It said, "Enter PIN," in black letters against a pale blue background. Reacher tried 1111. The phone vibrated. The screen momentarily went blank. Then, "Enter PIN" reappeared. Reacher tried 1234. A digital clock appeared, along with a symbol. An envelope, indicating that a text message was waiting. Reacher used the menu to open it, and the screen filled with characters. "Thanks for last night. Magic. Breakfast at Old Warehouse? I have something for you. Heidi, XXX. Reacher read it twice. This was why Heidi had left so early. She'd snuck off to hook up with this guy? Seriously? Then a whole different explanation sprang into his mind. One he liked even less. The map Reacher took from the hotel's reception showed a place called the Old Warehouse. It was the last site marked on the eastern side of town. When Reacher stopped the captured pickup 100 yards short, he figured it was more like a dilapidated shed. It looked dirty, rickety, on the verge of collapse. But his aesthetic and structural complaints were the least of his worries. He'd been drawn into a tactical nightmare. There was only a single road in and out. He should have scouted an alternative escape route. He should have been approaching from the opposite side. He should have been there hours earlier, in a less distinctive vehicle, and without 2 hostages hastily secured in the load bed. He should have walked away. He wanted to walk away. But Heidi. Someone had sent that text. If it was Heidi herself, and it was intended for the top-heavy guy, then no harm, no foul. Under the circumstances, Reacher would be delighted if that was the explanation. Because if someone else had sent it, that meant Heidi was being held captive. Or worse. Reacher jammed the spare magazines between the squab of the passenger seat and its backrest. He tucked one Beretta under his right thigh, wound down his window, took the other Beretta in his left hand, shifted back into drive, shook his head, and continued toward the warehouse. He made it all the way to the structure unopposed. He drove in through a gap in the wooden siding. No one shot at him, so he kept going until he was as deep in the shadows as he could get. Reacher stepped back out through the gap in the wall and cursed another weakness in his situation. His complete lack of intel. He had no idea how the plan was supposed to unfold. All he could do was put himself in the shoes of whoever he imagined was behind it. Try to anticipate what they wanted to achieve and how they would go about it, and act accordingly. He sat down and leaned gingerly against the wooden planks in the spot where he'd be most visible from the road, put his hands behind his back, brought his chin down onto his chest, and waited. 10 minutes ticked by. The temperature rose another 3 or 4 degrees. Reacher felt the sweat prickling his scalp and soaking his shirt. Then he heard a vehicle. It drew closer, slowed down. Its wheels swapped pavement for gravel. It kept coming and coming, straight toward him. For a crazy moment, Reacher thought he was going to get run over. Then it crunched to a stop. The motor died. A door opened. Reacher held his breath. Feet hit the ground. They took a step. Another, and stopped. About level with knees, Reacher thought. He still didn't breathe. He couldn't. Not without his chest moving. He held on for another 30 seconds, then snapped his head up and whipped both arms around to the front, a Beretta firmly in each hand. The guy who'd approached leaped back, panicked at first, but he quickly regained control and kept moving smoothly until he was 30 yards away. A reasonable position, since he had a hunting rifle in his hands and was pointing it straight at Reacher's chest. "Drop the guns," the guy said. "It's over. You'd never hit me from there. Want a bet? Reacher got to his feet and darted behind the guy's car. It was a Toyota Prius, dark blue, with a pale dusting of sand. There was a body in the passenger seat. It was Heidi's. She had no visible injuries, but Reacher knew she was dead. She had the unnatural stillness that only comes when every electrical impulse is shut down and the last vestige of life is past. Reacher ducked down and shifted to place the car's engine block, such as it was, between him and the guy with the rifle. He cocked the hammer on one of his guns, slid the other into his waistband, then relaxed his arms and rested his hands on his knees. "What's your name?" Reacher said. "What the hell?" the guy said. "You're not going to live to tell anyone. It's Greenwood, Mason Greenwood. Why did you kill the woman?" "I didn't." Greenwood smirked. "You did. I was out hunting, and I heard a commotion over here, so I came to investigate. Saw you strangling the girl. Then you threw her down. So I shot you, hoping to save her. But I was too late. She must have banged her head on a rock. Shame, really. Meaning you strangled her. You threw her down. She hit her head on something else. Somewhere else. And you're trying to pin it on me. I didn't throw her down. I let her go. Then she slipped, hit her head. It was an accident, really. And I'm not trying to pin the whole thing on you. I'm succeeding. It won't work, Greenwood. Trust me. I used to investigate homicides. Your plan is full of holes. The police will know the body was moved. Your hands are way smaller than mine, so the bruises on her neck won't add up. And you won't be able to find a rock that matches the crack in her skull. You know what, Reacher? If we were in a city, some of that might matter. It might matter in a town, even a small one. But out here, after the sun and the critters have worked on her body for a day or two, forget it. And there's something else. Whoever drags his ass all the way out here will be at the top of his boss's shit list when I call it in. They're not going to be looking for clues. They'll be looking for a closed case. One that means the next crappy job gets dumped on someone else. And who are you? The new kid in town. The perfect one to take the blame. No one knows you. No one will vouch for you. No one will miss you. You have a very depressing worldview, Greenwood. But maybe you're right. Maybe the safest way forward is for me to call it in, and to identify you as the perpetrator at the same time. For you to call it in. You think you can call with a rifle bullet in your brain? How's that bullet going to get into my brain, Greenwood? How good a shot do you think you are? Because if you miss high, I've got a clear shot with 2 guns while you reload. And if you miss low, you hit your car, most likely immobilizing it, which is going to complicate your story some. You heard a disturbance, shot up your own car, then shot me? I don't think that'll fly. I won't miss. And if I do, I can reload as many times as I want. You'll never hit me from there. Not if you had 10 handguns. You sure? Let's find out. Take a shot. See what happens. Greenwood raised the rifle, took a breath, started to squeeze the trigger. Then a box fixed to his belt started to bleep and buzz. The rifle discharged. The bullet hit the side of the warehouse, 20 feet above the ground. Reacher stood up straight, feet apart, shoulders square, arms out in front. He aimed, pulled the trigger, and watched Greenwood buckle and fall. He approached the body, kicked the rifle away, raised the pistol again, ready for the customary 2 insurance shots to the head. Old habits die hard. But he didn't pull the trigger. He was thinking about Greenwood's theory. About lazy cops looking for easily closed cases. There might be something in that, in which case He could give them 2. And maybe give Heidi's death a little meaning, too. It would take a little staging, but maybe he could make it look like she'd defended herself, escaped from Greenwood's chokehold, ran a little, turned, shot him so he couldn't come after her again, then slipped and hit her head. It might work. And if it didn't, no one would be any worse off. Reacher emptied Greenwood's pockets, then went to work on positioning the bodies. It was unpleasant work. Hot, smelly, awkward. He didn't enjoy it, but he was pleased with the result. When he was done, he moved into the shade at the side of the warehouse and checked Greenwood's things. There were only 2. His phone and the box from his belt that had bleeped and distracted him. Reacher started with that one. It looked a bit like an old-fashioned radio pager, only it was thinner and it had a bigger screen. Part of the screen had a printed permanent display. It was a list. Zone 1 to Zone 6. And the boxes next to Zones 5 and 6 were checked. It was for a security alarm, Reacher figured. He couldn't think of another kind of system that used zones in that way. Presumably for Greenwood's house. Someone must have broken into it at the exact same time Greenwood was trying to frame Reacher. Which could have been a coincidence, of course. A lucky break for some local hoodlum chancing their arm. But Reacher wasn't a big believer in coincidences. The best Reacher could figure it. Greenwood had lured Heidi someplace and killed her there, presumably out of jealousy. Maybe her death was premeditated. Maybe things got out of control and she slipped, as Greenwood claimed. But either way, he would have kept her body on ice until his stooges delivered Reacher to the warehouse for the frame-up, with the extra cell phone in his pocket, complete with its incriminating message. Maybe that place was Greenwood's house. A logical place for a rendezvous. Familiar, not suspicious, and which had just been broken into. Which could have been a coincidence. Neither stooge had called or texted Greenwood to say they'd arrived, since they were both unconscious. Yet Greenwood arrived at the old warehouse within 10 minutes. Which meant his house, if that was where he'd killed Heidi, was likely within visual range. Reacher moved away from the building and looked back toward the town. One structure jumped out at him, the next one in line. Another old place, a quarter of a mile away. Reacher parked the orange and white pickup at the front of the building. It was wide and low, with a deep porch with anchors for a swing chair, made of gnarled old wood, topped with shingles that were warped and bleached by the sun. He stepped onto the porch and peered through the dusty windows. The place looked deserted. He made his way around the side. The wall was plain and featureless. He turned the next corner and almost walked into a car. A silver sedan. German. Connecticut plates. 10 or 15 years old, belonging to Chuck Bell, but no longer in good shape, because it had been driven into the rear wall of the garage, through the rear wall, in fact. It had smashed into an RV that was parked inside, then it had been pulled back out. The driver's door was standing open, but there was no sign of a driver. Reacher ducked down and went through the hole in the wall. He skirted around the RV and used a door that led to a kitchen. A super-modern space, nothing like the outside of the place at all. It was all stainless steel and granite, and there were all kinds of appliances Reacher didn't even recognize. The only thing he was familiar with was an empty champagne bottle sitting on one of the countertops. He ignored it and moved on to the next room. An office. There were 3 wide desks covered with computer monitors, a row of file cabinets along the opposite wall, heaps of folders on the floor, along with a person. Bell. He was slumped against the pedestal of the center desk. His face was contorted, his skin was gray, His hair was damp and plastered to his scalp. He was breathing, but fast and shallow. He saw Reacher and managed to lift one hand just enough to beckon him over. He seemed like he wanted to talk, so Reacher leaned in close. "Sorry." Bell's voice was a rasping whisper. "Lied. Again." "It's okay," Reacher said. "Don't try to talk." "Didn't hack chat room. Hacked this guy. He'd..." "Take it easy." Reacher put his hand on Bell's shoulder. "I'll get you to the hospital." "No." Bell paused, gasping for air. "Too late. Promise. Burn it. Burn it." Then his head slumped to the side, and the last of the light left his eyes. Reacher sat on the floor next to Bell and felt for a pulse in his neck, just to be sure. There wasn't one. Reacher stayed for another minute. He felt like rushing away would be disrespectful somehow. Then he noticed Bell's other hand was crushing a piece of paper to his chest. Reacher pried it free and immediately wished he hadn't. The paper was letter-sized. It was printed on the other side. A color photograph of two people. A man and a little girl. Both were naked. Both Reacher recognized. The man was Greenwood, maybe 15 years younger. Reacher needed to be sure about the girl. He slid his hand inside Bell's jacket and pulled out his wallet. He opened it and took out a photograph. The one he'd glimpsed at the hotel. Bell's daughter, when she was 3. Bell's ex-wife hadn't taken her. Greenwood had. Reacher stood. He wished with all his being that he hadn't already killed Greenwood, because he wanted to do it again. And again. And again. He wondered if that was why Bell had come. For vengeance? And then something Greenwood had said at the warehouse came back to him. "You're the new kid. No one knows you." He'd meant Reacher, but he was wrong. Reacher and Bell had arrived together. Only Reacher was driving at the time. Bell was in the back seat. Technically, he'd entered the town a moment later. So Bell was the new kid. The perfect one to take the blame. Blame, Reacher thought, or credit. Reacher hoisted Bell's body up and over his shoulder. He had some arson to attend to, a couple of trussed-up stooges to deal with. But first, there was a shooting he had to restage.
This concludes the reading of New Kid in Town by Andrew Child.